The massive gates of the Harrison mansion opened slowly as Maria clutched her small suitcase with trembling hands. She had traveled 300 miles from her village to work as a maid for the wealthiest family in the country. The twin brothers, Alexander and Sebastian Harrison, were known throughout the nation not just for their billions, but for their strange and demanding behavior. Maria was only 22 years old, with kind brown eyes and calloused hands from years of helping her sick mother. Her family desperately needed money for her mother's medical treatment, and this job at the Harrison estate was her only hope. The employment agency had warned her that many maids had quit within days, but Maria was determined to succeed where others had failed. The head butler, Mr. Peterson, greeted her at the enormous front door. His stern face showed no warmth as he looked her up and down. "You must be the new kitchen maid," he said coldly. "I hope you last longer than the previous 12 girls who came before you." Maria's heart sank. 12 maids in just 6 months? What could be so difficult about working here? Mr. Peterson led her through marble hallways decorated with priceless paintings and crystal chandeliers. Everything screamed of wealth and luxury, but somehow the atmosphere felt cold and unwelcoming. "The Harrison twins are very particular about their food," Mr. Peterson explained as they walked. "They have rejected every meal prepared by every maid we've hired. Nothing seems to satisfy them. They claim the food tastes wrong, smells strange, or lacks something they cannot explain. Many maids have left in tears, convinced they were failures." They reached the kitchen, a massive room with professional-grade appliances and marble countertops. 3 other maids were busy preparing lunch, but they looked stressed and unhappy. One of them, an older woman named Rose, approached Maria with a sympathetic smile. "Welcome, dear," Rose whispered. "I've been here for 20 years, but I only clean and do laundry. I stopped trying to cook for the twins long ago. They haven't eaten a proper meal cooked by any of us in months. They either eat nothing or order food from expensive restaurants, which makes Mr. Peterson furious." Maria felt overwhelmed but tried to stay positive. "Maybe I can figure out what they like," she said hopefully. Rose shook her head sadly. "Honey, we've tried everything. French cuisine, Italian, Asian fusion, simple comfort food, healthy meals, rich desserts. Nothing works. Those boys are impossible to please. Some of us think they do it on purpose just to make the staff miserable." That evening, Maria was assigned to prepare dinner for the twins. She had learned from the other maids that Alexander and Sebastian were 28 years old and had inherited their fortune from their deceased parents. They lived alone in the massive mansion with just the household staff, rarely leaving except for business meetings. Maria decided to cook something simple and heartfelt, the same beef stew her grandmother used to make when she was little. She used fresh vegetables from the estate's garden and added her own special touch, a blend of herbs her grandmother had taught her. As she cooked, she thought about her sick mother and found herself putting extra love and care into every step. When dinner time arrived, Mr. Peterson carried the tray upstairs to the twins' private dining room. Maria waited anxiously in the kitchen with the other maids. Usually, the rejected food came back within minutes, barely touched, but tonight was different. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. The kitchen staff began to whisper among themselves. Was this a good sign or a bad one? Finally, Mr. Peterson returned to the kitchen, but his expression was unreadable. He set down the empty tray and stared at Maria in amazement. They ate everything," he said in disbelief. "Every single bite. In 20 years of working for this family, I have never seen the twins clean their plates when eating food prepared by household staff." The other maids gasped and gathered around Maria, asking what she had done differently, but Maria was just as shocked as everyone else. She had simply cooked the way her grandmother had taught her, with love and care for the people who would eat the food. The next morning brought another surprise. Usually, the twins left specific, complicated instructions about their meals through Mr. Peterson. Instead, Alexander Harrison himself came down to the kitchen, something that had never happened before. He was tall and handsome, with dark hair and piercing green eyes, but his expression was serious and somewhat cold. "You're the new maid who cooked dinner last night," he said, looking directly at Maria. "Yes, sir," Maria replied nervously, wondering if she was about to be criticized or fired. "We want you to prepare all our meals from now on," Alexander announced. "Only you. The other kitchen staff can help with preparation, but you must be the one to actually cook our food." The other maids exchanged shocked glances. Sebastian appeared in the doorway behind his brother, identical except for his slightly warmer expression. "The food was acceptable," Sebastian added, which from the twins was apparently the highest praise anyone had received in years. After the twins left, the kitchen erupted in excited chatter. Rose hugged Maria tightly. "You've done something miraculous, dear." "In all my years here, I've never seen them show any preference for anyone's cooking. You might actually survive this job." But Maria felt confused rather than triumphant. She hadn't done anything special or different. She had simply cooked with the same care and attention her family had taught her. Why did her food succeed when so many skilled cooks before her had failed? As she prepared lunch that day, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper happening here. The twins weren't just picky eaters. There seemed to be something almost desperate about their search for the right food. She had seen a brief flash of relief in Sebastian's eyes when he tasted her stew, as if he had been waiting years for that moment. What she didn't know was that her simple act of cooking with love was about to unlock a family secret that had been hidden for decades and change not just her life, but the lives of the mysterious Harrison twins forever. 3 weeks passed, and Maria had successfully prepared every meal for the Harrison twins without a single complaint. The other household staff treated her like a miracle worker, but Maria still couldn't understand what made her cooking so special. She used simple ingredients and basic techniques her grandmother had taught her in their tiny village kitchen years ago. One afternoon, while Maria was preparing a simple chicken soup, Sebastian appeared in the kitchen doorway. This was unusual, because the twins rarely interacted with the staff beyond giving orders. He stood there for several minutes, just watching her work with an expression she couldn't read. "That smells familiar," he said quietly, almost to himself. Maria looked up from chopping carrots. "It's just chicken soup, sir. Nothing fancy." Sebastian stepped closer, his eyes focused on her hands as she worked. "The way you cut the vegetables, it reminds me of someone." His voice became softer, almost vulnerable. "We had a cook once when we were very young, before our parents died." This was the most personal information either twin had ever shared with any staff member. Maria continued working but listened carefully, sensing that Sebastian needed to talk. "Her name was Elena," Sebastian continued, leaning against the kitchen counter. "She was from a small village like you. She cooked for us from the time we were 7 until we were 12. After our parents died in the car accident, the lawyers and estate managers sent her away. They said we needed proper staff, not some village woman." Maria felt her heart ache for the young boys who had lost their parents and then lost the only person who cared for them with genuine warmth. "What happened to her?" she asked gently. Sebastian's expression grew sad. "We never saw her again. Alexander and I searched for her when we got older, but she seemed to have disappeared completely. We hired private investigators, but they found nothing." "Is that why you've been so particular about food?" Maria asked, beginning to understand. Sebastian nodded slowly. "Every meal since Elena left has tasted wrong somehow. We kept hoping that, someday, someone would cook something that reminded us of her, of feeling cared for instead of just served." He looked directly at Maria. "Your food tastes like love, like Elena's did." That evening, Maria prepared dinner with Sebastian's words. echoing in her mind. She now understood that the twins weren't just spoiled billionaires, they were orphaned boys still searching for the warmth they had lost. As she seasoned the roast beef, she thought about Elena, the mysterious cook who had loved these children, and then vanished from their lives. Alexander joined his brother for dinner as usual, but tonight Sebastian was more talkative than normal. "I told her about Elena," he said to his twin. Alexander's fork paused halfway to his mouth. For a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked, showing the same vulnerability Maria had seen in Sebastian. "You shouldn't have," he said quietly. "It doesn't matter anymore." But Maria could see that it did matter. Both brothers carried the pain of losing Elena, though Alexander tried harder to hide it. She made a mental note to ask Rose more about the twins' childhood when she had the chance. The next morning, Rose was happy to share what she knew. "Oh yes, Elena was wonderful," the older maid said while folding laundry. "She was hired right. After the boys' parents died, those poor children were so lost and frightened. Elena treated them like they were her own sons, not just her employers," Rose continued. "She would sing while she cooked, and the boys would sit in the kitchen doing their homework just to be near her. She taught them little things, how to tie their shoes properly, how to say please and thank you, how to comfort each other when they had nightmares. She was more like a mother than a cook." "Why did the estate managers send her away?" Maria asked. "They said she was too informal, that wealthy boys needed to learn proper boundaries with staff. They wanted the twins to grow up appropriately for their station in life." Rose's voice was bitter. "They brought in fancy governesses and professional cooks, but those boys were never the same. They became cold and distant, like they built walls around their hearts." Maria spent the rest of the day thinking about this information. She began to understand why her simple, loving approach to cooking had succeeded where sophisticated techniques had failed. The twins weren't looking for perfect cuisine. They were looking for the feeling of being cared for. That night, she decided to try something different. Instead of just cooking dinner, she baked cookies, simple sugar cookies like her grandmother used to make for special occasions. She didn't know if Elena had ever baked for the boys, but she felt inspired to try something that felt more personal and nurturing. When Mr. Peterson brought the dinner tray back, he also carried a small plate with 2 cookies. The twins asked, "Me to tell you that the cookies were unexpected," he said. Coming from the Harrison brothers, this was practically a declaration of love. The next few days brought small changes. Sebastian began stopping by the kitchen more often, sometimes just watching Maria work. Alexander remained more distant, but she noticed he had started requesting specific dishes, always simple, home-style meals rather than the elaborate cuisine the previous cooks had attempted. One evening, while Maria was cleaning up after dinner, Sebastian appeared with both dinner plates. Instead of leaving them for Mr. Peterson to collect, he brought them to the kitchen himself. "I wanted to thank you properly," he said, setting the plates on the counter. "Not just for the food, but for caring. We haven't felt that in a very long time." Maria smiled warmly. "Cooking is how I show love, sir. My grandmother always said that food made with care nourishes more than just the body." Sebastian's eyes filled with unexpected emotion. "Elena used to say something similar. She said that food prepared with love could heal hearts as well as hunger." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Sebastian spoke again. "Maria, would you be willing to cook something special tomorrow night? Something that might remind us even more of Elena?" "Of course, sir. What would you like?" Sebastian hesitated, as if the request was difficult to make. "Birthday cake. It's our birthday tomorrow, Alexander's and mine. Elena used to make us a simple vanilla cake with chocolate frosting. We haven't celebrated our birthday since she left." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. These grown men, worth billions of dollars, had stopped celebrating their birthdays when they lost the one person who had made them feel loved. I would be honored to make your birthday cake, she said softly. Sigh. Sebastian left the kitchen. Maria began planning the most important meal she had ever prepared. She didn't just want to make a cake. She wanted to give two lonely men back a piece of their childhood, a connection to the love they had lost so many years ago. What she didn't realize was that this birthday cake would lead to a discovery that would change everything. Not just about the twins' past, but about her own surprising connection to their story. Maria spent the entire morning preparing for the twins' birthday dinner. She wanted everything to be perfect, knowing how much this meal meant to them. She had asked Rose about Elena's cooking style and learned that the former cook had always kept things simple, but made everything from scratch with the finest ingredients. For the main course, Maria prepared Elena's favorite dish for the boys: roast chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes, and green beans. But the birthday cake was what consumed most of her attention. She made it exactly as Sebastian had described, a simple vanilla cake with rich chocolate frosting decorated with fresh strawberries from the estate's garden. As she worked, Maria found herself thinking about her own childhood. Her grandmother had always made special birthday cakes too, and there was something about the process that felt deeply familiar. The way she mixed the batter, the careful attention to the oven temperature, even the way she spread the frosting, it all came so naturally, as if she had been making this exact cake her entire life. That evening, the entire household staff seemed to hold their breath as Mr. Peterson carried the special birthday dinner upstairs. Even the usually stern butler seemed moved by the occasion, handling the tray with extra care. Maria waited in the kitchen, more nervous than she had ever been. This wasn't just about cooking anymore. She was trying to recreate a lost piece of the twins' childhood, to give them back something precious that had been taken away. 20 minutes later, something unprecedented happened. Both Alexander and Sebastian came down to the kitchen together. Maria had never seen them both outside their private quarters at the same time before. Alexander was carrying the empty cake plate, while Sebastian held something in his hands, an old, worn photograph. The cake was perfect, Sebastian said, his voice thick with emotion, exactly like Elena's. Alexander, usually so controlled and distant, had tears in his eyes. "We need to show you something," he said, extending the photograph toward Maria. "We found this after dinner, in a box of things we saved from our childhood." Maria took the photograph with trembling hands. It was old and slightly faded, showing two young boys, clearly Alexander and Sebastian, at around age 10, standing in what looked like the very kitchen where she now worked. Between them stood a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, wearing a simple dress and apron. She was holding a birthday cake identical to the one Maria had just made. But what made Maria's heart stop was the woman's face. Even though the photograph was old and the woman was much younger, there was something unmistakably familiar about her features. The shape of her eyes, the gentle smile, the way she held herself. It all reminded Maria of someone. "This is Elena," Sebastian said softly. "The only picture we have of her." Maria stared at the photograph, feeling dizzy. The woman looked remarkably like her own grandmother, or rather, like her grandmother had looked in the few old photographs Maria had seen from decades ago. But that was impossible, wasn't it? "What was Elena's full name?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elena Rodriguez," Alexander answered. "She came from a small village about 300 miles from here. We never learned much about her family or background." Maria's legs went weak, and she had to grab the kitchen counter for support. Rodriguez was her grandmother's maiden name, and her grandmother had worked for wealthy families when she was young, before she married and moved to their village. Could it be possible? "Are you all right?" Sebastian asked, concerned by Maria's reaction. I think Elena might have been my grandmother," Maria said, her voice shaking. The kitchen fell completely silent. The other staff members who had been listening from nearby doorways stepped forward, their faces showing amazement and disbelief. Alexander and Sebastian exchanged shocked glances. "Your grandmother?" Alexander asked. Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. Her maiden name was Elena Rodriguez, and she worked for wealthy families before she married my grandfather. She always told me stories about cooking for two little boys who had lost their parents, but she never mentioned their names. She said she had to leave them when they were still young, and it broke her heart. Sebastian sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, looking stunned. "Elena was your grandmother?" "She died 2 years ago," Maria continued, wiping her tears. "Before she passed, she kept talking about 2 boys she had loved like her own sons. She said she wished she could see them one more time, to know that they had grown up happy and strong." The twins were both crying now, not caring that the household staff was watching. For the first time since their parents died, they allowed themselves to show their true emotions. "She loved us," Sebastian whispered. "We always wondered if we were just a job to her, or if she really cared." "She talked about you until her last day," Maria assured them. "She called you her boys and said you were the closest thing to sons she ever had before my mother was born. She kept your memory in her heart for decades." Alexander stood up abruptly and left the kitchen, overwhelmed by emotion. Sebastian remained, reaching out to take Maria's hand. "No wonder your cooking felt so familiar," he said. "You learned from Elena. You cook with the same love she did." Maria squeezed his hand gently. "She taught me that food is love made visible. Every recipe she shared came with stories about caring for people, about making them feel safe and cherished, through simple meals prepared with attention and affection." Rose, who had been listening with tears in her own eyes, stepped forward. "This explains everything. Why you succeeded where so many others failed. You weren't just cooking food, you were carrying on Elena's legacy of love." That night, Alexander returned to the kitchen where Maria was finishing the dishes. His eyes were red from crying, but his expression was calmer than she had ever seen it. "I'm sorry I left so abruptly," he said. "Learning about Elena, it's overwhelming." "I understand, sir. It's overwhelming for me, too." Alexander looked at her carefully. "Please don't call me sir anymore. If you're Elena's granddaughter, then you're family to us. Elena was more of a parent to us than anyone else after our parents died." "I don't know what to say," Maria replied honestly. "Say you'll stay," Alexander said. "Not as just a maid, but as family. We lost Elena once. We don't want to lose her again through you." Maria felt her heart swell with emotion. She had come to this mansion looking for a job to help her sick mother, but she had found something much more precious. A connection to her beloved grandmother's past, and 2 lonely souls who needed the love Elena had taught her to give. But, as touching as this reunion was, Maria had no idea that the discovery of her connection to Elena was about to reveal an even bigger secret. One that would explain why the twins had been so desperately searching for the love they remembered, and why Maria's presence in their lives was not just a coincidence, but perhaps destiny itself. In the days following the revelation about Maria's connection to Elena, the atmosphere in the Harrison mansion changed completely. The twins began eating their meals in the kitchen with Maria instead of their formal dining room. They shared stories about their childhood with Elena, while Maria told them about her grandmother's later life and the loving family she had built in the village. But as heartwarming as these conversations were, Maria noticed that both brothers seemed troubled by something they weren't sharing. They would exchange meaningful looks when they thought she wasn't watching, and sometimes their conversations would stop abruptly when she entered the room. One evening, while Maria was preparing dinner, Sebastian came into the kitchen carrying a small wooden box that looked very old. His expression was serious, almost fearful. "Maria, we need to tell you something important," he said. Something we discovered when we went through more of our childhood belongings after learning about your connection to Elena. Alexander joined them, looking equally troubled. What we're about to show you might be shocking, he said. We've been debating whether to tell you, but we believe you have the right to know. Maria set down her knife and turned to face them, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. What is it? Sebastian opened the wooden box and pulled out a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. These are letters Elena wrote, but never sent. We found them hidden in her old room in the servants' quarters after she left. Letters to whom? Maria asked. To us, Alexander replied, but also to someone else, someone she called my precious daughter. Maria's heart began to race. Her grandmother had only had one daughter, Maria's mother. Sebastian untied the ribbon with careful hands and selected one of the letters. This one is dated just a few months before Elena left us. May I read part of it to you? Maria nodded, though she wasn't sure she was ready for whatever she was about to hear. Sebastian cleared his throat and began to read in a gentle voice. My dearest daughter, I know you must wonder why I stay away so long, why I cannot come home to you and your father as often as my heart desires. The truth is, these two boys need me more than I ever expected. They lost their parents so young, and they have no one else to show them love and kindness. He paused, looking at Maria with compassion before continuing. Alexander and Sebastian have become like sons to me. I know this might be hard for you to understand, but loving them doesn't mean I love you any less. There is room in a mother's heart for all her children, whether born from her body or born from her care. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. This was definitely her grandmother's voice, her way of expressing love and wisdom. Sebastian continued, reading, I dream of the day when you might meet these boys. I think you would love them as I do, and they would welcome you as a sister. You all have so much in common. Kind hearts, gentle souls, and the ability to find joy in simple things. Alexander took another letter from the bundle. This one is from right before she left us, he said. We think she knew the estate managers were planning to dismiss her. He began to read, My darling daughter, I must return home soon. The lawyers say I am no longer suitable to care for Alexander and Sebastian now that they are older. My heart is breaking, but perhaps it is time. You need your mother, and I have been selfish in staying away so long. Alexander's voice became thick with emotion as he continued. I want you to know about these two boys I have loved. They are good children who deserve happiness and love. If fate ever brings you into their lives, please remember that they are family to us, just as you are family to them. Maria was crying openly now, understanding the full weight of what her grandmother had sacrificed. Elena had stayed away from her own daughter for years to care for these orphaned boys, and then had to leave them behind to return to her family. There's more, Sebastian said softly, pulling out one final letter. This one was never finished. We think she was writing it the day she left. He read, My beloved boys, if you ever read this, please know that leaving you is the hardest thing I have ever done. You are not losing a cook or a caretaker. You are losing someone who loves you as deeply as any mother could love her sons. Sebastian's voice cracked as he continued. I pray that someday, somehow, our paths will cross again. If not in this life, then perhaps my love will find its way back to you through my daughter or her children. Love like ours doesn't disappear. It finds a way to continue. The kitchen was completely silent except for the sound of soft crying. Maria, Alexander, and Sebastian were all overwhelmed by the depth of Elena's love and the tragic separation that had torn their family apart. She never told me, Maria whispered. She never told me how much she loved you, how much it hurt her to leave you. Alexander wiped his eyes. She protected all of us. She didn't want you to feel like you had to compete for her love, and she didn't want us to feel abandoned on purpose. But we did feel abandoned, Sebastian added quietly. For years, we thought she just didn't care enough to stay. Maria looked at both of them with new understanding. That's why you've been so lost, so unable to accept love from anyone else. You've been waiting for her to come back. Sebastian nodded. Every cook we hired, every meal we rejected, we were unconsciously comparing everything to Elena, hoping someone would love us the way she did. And when you arrived, Alexander said, when your food tasted like love the way hers did, we recognized something familiar. We just didn't understand what it was. Maria reached out and took both their hands. She did come back to you in a way. Through me. Through the love she taught me to give. Rose, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward with tears streaming down her face. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. Elena's love survived across decades and brought you all together again. But their emotional reunion was interrupted by Mr. Peterson, who entered the kitchen looking unusually flustered. Excuse me, he said, but there's someone here to see Maria, a woman who says she's from Maria's village. She claims it's urgent. Maria's blood ran cold. The only person from her village who would travel all this way would be bringing news about her mother's health. She had been so caught up in the revelation about Elena and the twins that she had almost forgotten about the sick woman who was the reason she had taken this job in the first place. I'll come right away, Maria said, fear evident in her voice. Alexander and Sebastian exchanged concerned glances. After just discovering their connection to Maria, they couldn't bear the thought of losing her to some crisis at home. But what? None of them knew was that the visitor from Maria's village was about to reveal the final piece of a puzzle that would connect their stories in ways they could never have imagined and change all their lives forever. Maria hurried to the mansion's front parlor, her heart pounding with fear about what news the visitor might bring. Alexander and Sebastian followed closely behind, unwilling to let her face whatever crisis awaited alone. They had just found their connection to Elena through Maria, and the thought of losing her terrified them. The woman waiting in the parlor was Maria's Aunt Carmen, her mother's sister. But instead of the grim expression Maria expected to see, Carmen's face was filled with excitement and something that looked almost like wonder. Maria, mi niña, Carmen said, rushing forward to embrace her. I have traveled all this way because I found something incredible among your grandmother Elena's belongings, something that changes everything we thought we knew about our family. Maria felt relief wash over her. If Carmen was this excited, her mother must be okay. Is Mama all right? She asked first. Yes, she is much better, actually, Carmen assured her quickly. The new medicine is working, but that's not why I'm here. She looked around the elegant parlor, noticing Alexander and Sebastian for the first time. Are these your employers? This is Alexander and Sebastian Harrison, Maria said. It's complicated, but they're connected to Grandmother Elena in a special way. Carmen's eyes widened with recognition. Harrison? These are the boys? The ones Elena cared for? You know about us? Sebastian asked, surprised. Elena talked about you constantly after she returned to our village, Carmen explained. She would. Tell us stories about her boys who had lost their parents. She loved you both so much. Carmen's expression grew serious. But there's something Elena never told anyone. Not even your mother, Maria. Something I only discovered yesterday when I was cleaning out the old chest where she kept her most precious belongings. Carmen reached into her bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope, sealed with wax. This was hidden in a secret compartment of her jewelry box, along with some legal documents and a letter addressed to my family, to be opened only after my death. Maria's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Should I open it now? Yes, Carmen said firmly. Everyone who needs to hear this is in this room. Maria carefully broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter. Elena's familiar handwriting filled the pages, but the first lines made Maria gasp and nearly drop the paper. "What does it say?" Alexander asked gently. Maria's voice shook as she began to read aloud. "To my beloved family, if you are reading this, then I have passed on and taken my deepest secret with me. But I cannot rest in peace knowing that I kept this truth from those I loved most." She paused, scanning ahead, her face growing pale. "I don't understand. This doesn't make sense." "Keep reading, sweetheart," Carmen encouraged. Maria continued. "Alexander and Sebastian Harrison are not just boys I cared for out of duty or kindness. They are my grandsons, just as Maria is my granddaughter. They are family by blood, not just by love." The letter fell from Maria's hands as she stared at the twins in shock. Alexander caught the pages before they hit the floor, his own face white with disbelief. "That's impossible," Sebastian whispered. "Our parents were James and Victoria Harrison. We know our family history." Carmen shook her head sadly. "Elena explains it all in the letter. Please, continue reading." Alexander took over reading with a trembling voice. "When I was 17, I worked for a wealthy family in the city. The eldest son, James Harrison, was kind to me, and despite the difference in our social positions, we fell in love. When I became pregnant with his child, a daughter, his family was horrified." Sebastian sank into a chair, overwhelmed by what they were hearing. Alexander continued reading. "James wanted to marry me and legitimize our child, but his family threatened to disown him completely. They forced me to leave the city and promised to care for our daughter if I never contacted James again. I agreed because I wanted our child to have opportunities I could never provide." Maria felt dizzy with the implications of what she was hearing. "Grandmother had another daughter?" Carmen nodded solemnly. "Keep reading. It gets more complicated." Alexander's voice was barely audible as he continued. "I named our daughter Victoria, after James's mother, hoping it would help her be accepted into his family. She grew up believing she was adopted by the Harrisons out of charity. She never knew I was her real mother, and I was forbidden from seeing her." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together in Maria's mind, but the truth was almost too incredible to believe. "Years later," Alexander continued reading, "I learned that Victoria had married James, not knowing they were half-siblings, because the family had hidden the truth from both of them. When Alexander and Sebastian were born, they were not just my employer's children, they were my great-grandsons." Sebastian stood up abruptly, pacing the room as he tried to process this information. "You're saying that our mother Victoria was Elena's daughter, and our father James was also Elena's son?" "Not her son," Maria corrected, reading ahead in the letter. "James was Victoria's father. Your parents were half-siblings who never knew they were related." The room fell into stunned silence as everyone grasped the full meaning of Elena's revelation. Carmen spoke into the quiet. "Elena spent her whole life carrying this secret. She worked for you boys not just out of love, but out of guilt and responsibility. She felt she had failed Victoria by giving her up, and she was determined not to fail her great-grandsons." Alexander sat down heavily, the letter still in his hands. "This explains so much. Why she loved us so intensely, why losing her felt like losing a parent all over again. And why she couldn't tell you the truth," Maria added. "She would have had to explain that your parents' marriage was complicated." Sebastian looked at Maria with wonder. "If Elena was our great-grandmother, and she was your grandmother, then you're our second cousin," Maria finished. "We really are family." Carmen smiled through her tears. Elena's greatest wish was that all her grandchildren would find each other someday. She wrote in her private diary that she prayed for a miracle that would bring you all together again. Alexander looked at the letter again, scanning the remaining paragraphs. "There's more here about why she finally left us," he said softly. "She says the estate lawyers were starting to ask questions about why she was so emotionally invested in our well-being. She was afraid that if they investigated her background too deeply, they might discover the family connection and create a scandal that could hurt our inheritance." Sebastian sat back down, his head in his hands. "So she protected us by sacrificing herself again, just like she did when she gave up Victoria. She lived her whole life putting her family's needs before her own," Maria said, feeling a deep sadness for her grandmother's sacrifices. "She gave up her first daughter to ensure she had a good life, then gave up her great-grandsons to protect their future." Carmen reached into her bag again and pulled out a small wooden box. "There's one more thing. Elena left specific instructions that if her family ever reunited, this should be opened." She handed the box to Maria, who opened it carefully. Inside was a beautiful antique locket on a delicate gold chain. When Maria opened the locket, she found a tiny photograph of herself as a baby on one side, and an equally small photograph of Alexander and Sebastian as young children on the other. "She carried pictures of all her grandchildren close to her heart," Carmen explained. "Even when she couldn't be with you, she never stopped loving you or hoping for this day." Sebastian reached out to touch the locket gently. "She really did. Consider us family." "You were her family," Maria said firmly. "You are my family. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. And Elena loved all of us enough to sacrifice everything." Alexander stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the grounds of the estate where he and Sebastian had grown up feeling so alone. "All these years we've been searching for something we couldn't name. We thought it was just about the food, about finding someone who could cook like Elena. But it was really about finding our way back to family. And now you have," Carmen said warmly. "Elena's letter ends with a blessing for all her grandchildren. She wrote that she hoped you would find in each other the love and support that she couldn't always provide." Maria fastened the locket around her neck, feeling Elena's presence strongly. "We have a choice now," she said, looking at both twins. "We can honor grandmother's memory by building the family she always dreamed of, or we can let the complications of the past keep us apart." Sebastian reached out and took Maria's hand. "I choose family. I've spent too many years feeling alone and disconnected. Finding you, learning about Elena, discovering we're actually related. It feels like the missing pieces of my life are finally falling into place." Alexander turned from the window, his expression showing a vulnerability he rarely let anyone see. "I've been afraid to hope for family again. After losing our parents and then Elena, I built walls around my heart to protect myself from more loss. But maybe it's time to let those walls come down." Carmen watched the three young people with satisfaction. "Elena would be so proud to see you together like this. She always said that love finds a way to survive even the most impossible circumstances." "What happens now?" Maria asked. "I came here to work as a maid to earn money for Mama's medical bills, but everything has changed." "You're not a maid anymore," Alexander said firmly. "You're family, and family takes care of each other." Sebastian nodded in agreement. "We'll make sure your mother gets the best medical care available, and we want you to stay here not as an employee, but as our family." Maria felt tears of joy streaming down her face. "I'd like that very much." Carmen stood up, preparing to leave. "I should return to the village to tell your mother the wonderful news. She'll be so happy to know that Elena's boys found their way back to the family." As Carmen prepared to go, she turned back with one final message. Elena left one more instruction in her letter. She said that when her family was finally reunited, you should plant a garden together. She believed that growing things side by side would help heal the years of separation and create new memories rooted in love. After Carmen left, the three cousins sat in the parlor, still processing everything they had learned. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the peaceful quiet of people who had finally found where they belonged. "I keep thinking about all the meals I rejected over the years," Sebastian said quietly. "All those cooks who tried so hard to please us, and we couldn't accept their food because it didn't taste like love." "Elena's love," Alexander added. "We were unconsciously waiting for her to come back to us." Maria smiled through her tears. And in a way, she did. Through her recipes, her teachings, and her endless hope that love would bring us together again. The mystery of why the billionaire twins had rejected every maid's cooking except Maria's was finally solved. It hadn't been about culinary skill or fancy ingredients. It had been about family, love, and the unbreakable bonds that connect hearts across time and distance. Elena's greatest secret had become her greatest gift, reuniting the family she had loved and protected her entire life. 6 months had passed since the day Carmen arrived at the Harrison mansion with Elena's letter. The changes in everyone's lives had been remarkable and beautiful. The cold, lonely mansion had been transformed into a warm family home filled with laughter, conversation, and the constant aroma of meals prepared with love. Maria's mother had made a full recovery thanks to the excellent medical care Alexander and Sebastian had arranged. She now lived in a comfortable cottage on the estate grounds, close enough to visit with her daughter daily, but independent enough to maintain her dignity. The first time she met the twins, she had cried tears of joy, saying she could see Elena's love shining in their eyes. The mansion's kitchen had become the heart of their new family life. Every morning, Maria would prepare breakfast while Alexander and Sebastian sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee and planning their day. They had learned to cook alongside Maria, wanting to connect with Elena's memory through the recipes she had taught her granddaughter. Rose and the other household staff had adapted beautifully to the changes. Instead of feeling like servants, in a cold, formal house, they now felt like part of an extended family. The twins treated everyone with warmth and respect, having learned from Elena's example that true nobility comes from kindness, not wealth. The business empire that Alexander and Sebastian had inherited continued to thrive, but their approach to leadership had changed dramatically. They established a foundation in Elena's name that provided support for working mothers and children who had lost their parents. They also implemented family-friendly policies in all their companies, understanding firsthand how important loving relationships are to human happiness. Today was a special day. They were dedicating the garden that Carmen had suggested they plant together in Elena's memory. The space they had chosen was visible from the kitchen window, a sunny spot where Elena used to sit with the boys when they were young. Maria knelt in the rich soil, planting tomatoes and herbs that Elena had grown in her own garden back in the village. Alexander was carefully placing stakes for the climbing beans, while Sebastian prepared the flower beds where they would plant Elena's favorite roses. "Do you think she would be proud of us?" Sebastian asked, pausing in his work to look at the kitchen window where Elena used to watch them play. "I think she would be amazed," Maria replied, wiping soil from her hands. "She spent her whole life trying to keep her family together, even when it meant sacrificing her own happiness. Now we're all here choosing to be together, building something beautiful in her honor." Alexander stood up, stretching his back. "I've been thinking about something Elena wrote in one of her letters. She said that love doesn't disappear, it finds a way to continue. I used to think that was just wishful thinking, but now I understand what she meant." "Her love lives on in everything we do," Maria agreed. "In the way we care for each other, in the meals we share, in the kindness we show to others." As they worked, other family members joined them. Maria's mother brought fresh lemonade and sandwiches, insisting that gardening was hungry work. Rose appeared with gardening gloves for everyone, claiming that proper tools made all the difference. Even Mr. Peterson, who had softened considerably over the months, offered to help with the heavier digging. By evening, they had created a beautiful garden, that would bloom throughout the seasons. There were vegetables and herbs for cooking, flowers for beauty, and fruit trees that would provide shade and sweetness for years to come. That night, as they gathered for dinner in the kitchen, as had become their tradition, Alexander raised his glass of water in a toast. "To Elena Rodriguez," he said solemnly, "the woman who taught us that family is not defined by blood alone, but by the love we choose to give each other." "To Elena," Sebastian echoed, "who never stopped believing that love could overcome any obstacle." "To my grandmother," Maria added, "who showed us that the most powerful force in the world is a heart that refuses to stop caring." They drank their toast in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the remarkable woman who had shaped all their lives. Later that evening, Maria was cleaning up the kitchen when she found a letter that had been delivered earlier but forgotten in the excitement of the garden dedication. It was addressed to the Harrison family, with no return address. She opened it carefully and began to read. The letter was from a woman named Sarah, who wrote that she had seen a news article about the Elena Rodriguez Foundation that the twins had established. Sarah explained that her grandmother had worked alongside Elena many years ago, and that Elena had often spoken about the children she cared for. But the most remarkable part of the letter was Sarah's closing paragraph. "My grandmother saved letters that Elena wrote to her, letters where she talked about her greatest dream, that someday all the children she loved would find each other and create the family she had always hoped for. I wanted you to know that Elena's friends remembered her dream too, and we are all so happy to learn that it came true." Maria shared the letter with Alexander and Sebastian, and they marveled at how Elena's influence had spread far beyond their own lives. She had touched many people with her capacity for love, and her legacy continued to inspire others even now. As the months turned into years, the Harrison mansion became known throughout the region not for its wealth, but for its warmth. The twins regularly hosted dinners for employees, charity events for the foundation, and holiday celebrations that brought together people from all walks of life. Maria eventually married a kind doctor who worked at the children's hospital the foundation supported. Alexander found love with a teacher who shared his passion for helping orphaned children. Sebastian met his future wife at a cooking class he had enrolled in to better honor Elena's memory. But through all the changes and new additions to their family, the three cousins remained as close as siblings. Every Sunday they gathered in Elena's garden to share a meal and remember the remarkable woman who had brought them together. The mystery of the billionaire twins who rejected every maid's cooking except Maria's had become a beautiful love story. Not the romantic kind found in fairy tales, but the deeper, more enduring love of family connections that survive across generations. Elena's secret had been her greatest gift. In trying to protect and love each of her grandchildren separately, she had planted the seeds for them to find each other and create something even more beautiful together. Her legacy lived on in every meal cooked with love, every kindness shown to a stranger, and every moment when her family chose to cherish each other. The lonely billionaire twins had found their home at last, not in their mansion or their wealth, but in the loving family that Elena's heart had dreamed into existence. And Maria, the poor maid who had come looking for work, had discovered that she was rich beyond measure in the most important currency of all, the unbreakable bonds of love that connect hearts across time, distance, and even death. In the end, Elena's greatest recipe had been the simplest one of all. Take generous portions of love, patience, and sacrifice, mix with hope and faith, and serve with an open heart. It was a recipe that would nourish the Harrison family for generations to come.